In the quiet hills of Canaan, where sheep grazed under the sun and the wind whispered through olive trees, lived a man named Jacob. His family was large, 12 sons in all, but one of them held a special place in his heart. Joseph, the son of his old age, the child of his beloved Rachel. Joseph was different, not just in how he looked, but in how he carried himself. He had kind eyes, a gentle spirit, and a heart full of wonder. While his older brothers toiled in the fields, Joseph often stayed close to his father, learning, listening, and dreaming. One day, Jacob surprised Joseph with a gift that would change everything: a coat. But not just any coat. It was richly woven, bursting with color, deep reds, royal blues, golden threads that shimmered like morning light. To Jacob, it was a symbol of love, but to Joseph's brothers, it was a wound, a reminder that he was favored above them all. They watched him from afar, their hearts slowly filling with bitterness. While Joseph smiled with innocence, they whispered among themselves, "Why him? Why always him?" But Joseph, unaware of their growing anger, remained the same, gentle, eager, and full of dreams. And then, the dreams began. In the hush of the night, Joseph dreamed of the fields. In his vision, he and his brothers were binding sheaves of grain. Suddenly, his sheaf stood upright, while theirs gathered around it and bowed low. The dream stirred something deep inside him, so real, so vivid he had to share it. The next morning, at the break of dawn, he rushed to his brothers, face lit with excitement. He told them what he saw, but instead of wonder, they gave him scorn. Their glares sharpened. "Will you truly reign over us?" they asked. "Shall we bow to you?" The dream that had thrilled Joseph only fueled their hatred. But it didn't end there. Another night, another vision. This time, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowed before him. When he shared this dream not just with his brothers but with his father too, it caused even Jacob to pause. "What is this dream?" Jacob asked, confused. "Shall your mother and I, and your brothers, indeed bow down to you?" Yet, even in his doubt, Jacob kept the matter in his heart. Something about Joseph, something about these dreams felt destined. And so, the days continued, as tension brewed like thunderclouds. Joseph, young and unaware, walked forward in innocence. His brothers, older and hardened, watched in silence. But behind every moment, behind every jealous glare and colorful thread, a greater story was beginning to unfold, one that would lead from betrayal to glory, from pit to palace, from dreams to destiny. Joseph had no idea what lay ahead, but heaven already did. The sun rose over the hills of Shechem, painting the land in warm gold. Joseph's brothers had taken the flocks far from home, tending them in the open fields. Days passed, and Jacob grew restless. He called Joseph to his side, placing a father's trust in his youngest. "Go now," Jacob said, "find your brothers and bring back word." Joseph, always eager to obey, put on his colorful robe and set off across the dusty paths of Canaan. He did not know he was walking straight into the arms of betrayal. His journey led him to Shechem, but the brothers were nowhere to be found. A stranger found him wandering and told him they had gone to Dothan. And so, Joseph pressed on, determined, hopeful. But long before he arrived, the brothers saw him coming. From the distance, that robe of many colors shimmered under the sun. Their hatred surged. Each step Joseph took felt like a drumbeat of offense. "Behold, the dreamer cometh," one of them spat. "What if?" another whispered, "we kill him now?" Reuben, the eldest, stepped forward. "No, let's not shed blood. Cast him into a pit, and leave him." He planned to come back later and rescue him in secret. Joseph arrived with a smile, unaware of the storm behind those familiar faces. But before he could greet them, they seized him. Their hands were rough. They stripped off the robe, the beautiful coat that had once filled Joseph with pride now became a symbol of their rage. Without a word of mercy, they dragged him to a nearby pit, deep, dark, and empty, and threw him in. The echo of his fall faded into silence. They sat nearby, unmoved, eating bread while their brother cried out from the pit. Then came the caravan traders from Midian on camels, heading toward Egypt. Judah's eyes gleamed with opportunity. "Why kill him?" he said. "Let's sell him. He is our brother." "Yes, but a prophet's a prophet," they agreed. They pulled Joseph up. The boy was trembling, pleading, but no one listened. Silver clinked into their hands, 20 pieces for a soul. The traders took Joseph, binding his hands as they led him away. He looked back one last time, eyes full of confusion and sorrow, but his brothers looked away. To hide their deed, they slaughtered a goat and dipped the multicolored robe in its blood. When they returned home, they handed it to Jacob. "Is this your son's coat?" Jacob trembled as he held the stained garment. His face went pale, his knees buckled. "It is my son's," he wept. "A wild beast has devoured him. Joseph is torn to pieces." He tore his own robe, falling to the ground in anguish. No comfort could ease his sorrow. Day and night, he mourned. And far away, as the caravan moved toward the land of Pharaohs, Joseph sat bound among strangers. His eyes red from crying, his heart broken. He had been betrayed not by enemies but by his own blood. But even now, as he journeyed into the unknown, a greater plan was still unfolding. Though the road would be long and painful, the dream was not dead. Heaven was still watching. The wines of Egypt carried the scent of foreign spices and warm dust. The city bustled with chariots, merchants, and men in fine linen. But in the midst of it all, one young Hebrew walked behind a caravan bound, bruised, and broken. Joseph, sold like cargo. Stripped of his home, his language, and his family, but not his faith. The traders led him through the city gates, into the markets where men were sold like wares. Voices shouted prices, slaves stood lined like pottery. And there, in the crowd, stood a man of influence, Potiphar, captain of Pharaoh's guard. Potiphar's eyes locked onto Joseph. The boy's presence was different, dignity wrapped in chains. Potiphar made the purchase. Just like that, Joseph became a servant in the captain's house. But Joseph carried something stronger than bitterness. He served with humility, with excellence. And the Lord was with him. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months. Potiphar began to see it everything Joseph touched prospered. His livestock multiplied, his home ran smoother, his wealth increased. Joseph, the Hebrew slave, was no longer just a servant. He became steward over all Potiphar owned. He walked the marble halls with authority, oversaw the food stores, managed the house staff, and even in a foreign land, Joseph stood out not just for his wisdom, but for his strength and appearance. And Potiphar's wife noticed. At first, it was glances, then smiles, then words that held double meanings, but Joseph avoided her gaze. He stayed late in the fields, finished early in the house. He would not betray the man who had trusted him. And he would not sin against God. Still, she pressed on. Day after day, temptation came like waves, but Joseph stood like a rock. And then one day, the house was quiet. No servants, no bustle, only silence. Joseph entered to complete his tasks unsuspecting, unaware, and suddenly there she was. Potiphar's wife, alone, waiting. She grabbed his garment. Her eyes intense, voice slow, "Lie with me." Joseph's heart pounded, but he didn't argue. He didn't reason. He ran. The fabric tore in her grip as he fled the house, leaving his garment behind. Shame turned to fury in her eyes. Her pride wounded, she screamed. Servants rushed in. And when Potiphar returned, she held up Joseph's garment like a trophy of false betrayal. "That Hebrew slave tried to defile me," she said. Potiphar's face darkened. His heart wrestled with disbelief and duty. But reputation won over reason. Joseph was taken bound again. This time not to a caravan, but to a dungeon. The prison was cold, the walls thick with silence. But even there, the light of God followed Joseph. And though the chains returned, so did favor. For what men meant for harm, God was still weaving for good. The dungeon was thick with dampness. Echoes of distant groans bounced off stone walls. Yet in the corner of this shadowed place, Joseph served. The guards noticed. He didn't just exist, he cared, cleaned, encouraged, a flicker of light in a place swallowed by despair. And the Lord was with him, even here. In time, the warden gave him charge over the prison. Keys didn't change hands, but trust did. Joseph kept records, assigned duties, offered words of hope. Even in chains, he was a leader. Then one day, two new faces entered the dungeon, tired, angry, confused. The chief butler and the chief baker of Pharaoh himself. Rumors swirled of an offense, a royal temper flared. And now they sat on cold stone beside Joseph. Joseph didn't ask what they did. He simply offered water and kindness. Days passed, and one night two dreams came. Each man stirred from sleep with furrowed brows, haunted eyes. Joseph noticed at once. "Why do your faces look so troubled today?" he asked. The butler spoke first. "We both had dreams last night, but there is no one to interpret them." Joseph leaned forward. "Interpretations belong to God. Tell me." The butler recounted his dream, a vine with 3 branches, blossoming with grapes. He pressed the grapes into Pharaoh's cup and handed it to him. Joseph's eyes lit with divine insight. "In 3 days," he said, "Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position." The butler's face bloomed with hope. Joseph added gently, "When that happens, remember me. Mention me to Pharaoh. I was taken from my land unjustly, and even here, I've done nothing to deserve this prison." Then the baker stepped forward eagerly. His eyes held expectation. "In my dream," he said, "I had 3 baskets of bread on my head. In the top basket were pastries for Pharaoh. But birds came and ate from it." Joseph's smile faded. He took a breath. "In 3 days," he said solemnly, "Pharaoh will lift off your head and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh." The silence that followed was heavy. 3 days passed, and just as Joseph had said, the butler was restored. The baker was executed, but the butler, he forgot. Joseph remained in the dungeon. One day turned to weeks. Weeks to months, and yet Joseph waited, unseen by Pharaoh, but never forgotten by God. 2 full years had passed. Joseph remained in the prison, forgotten by the butler, but not by heaven. Then one restless night, Pharaoh dreamed. The king of Egypt stirred in his golden chamber, sweat beading his forehead. In his dream, he stood by the river Nile. From the water rose 7 fat, sleek cows grazing peacefully among the reeds. Then came 7 other cows, thin, sickly, starved, and to Pharaoh's horror, the thin cows devoured the fat ones. He awoke alarmed. But sleep found him again, and the second dream came. This time, 7 full, ripe heads of grain swayed on one stalk. Then 7 thin, scorched ones sprang up beside them and swallowed the good ones whole. Pharaoh sat up in bed, shaken. He called for every magician, every wise man of Egypt. They lined up in his court, but none could explain the meaning. The palace murmured with fear. Then, the butler's eyes widened. "My king," he said cautiously, "I remember my offenses today. There was a Hebrew youth in the dungeon when I and the baker were imprisoned. We both had dreams, and this young man. He interpreted them, and it happened just as he said." Pharaoh stood tall. "Bring him immediately." Down in the dungeon, Joseph was still sweeping when the guards approached. But this time, they didn't shout. They brought new clothes. They shaved him, bathed him. Joseph stood clean before the king of the most powerful nation on earth. Pharaoh eyed him. "I had a dream. No one can interpret it, but I've heard. You can." Joseph looked into the eyes of a man who could command armies with a word. He bowed. "I cannot, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he seeks." Pharaoh described both dreams. Joseph closed his eyes. In the silence, the Spirit of God stirred within him. He opened them slowly. Both dreams are one. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of abundance will fill Egypt, but they will be followed by 7 years of severe famine. So harsh, the good years will be forgotten. Pharaoh leaned forward. "Let Pharaoh find a wise and discerning man," Joseph continued, "and set him over the land. Let him appoint overseers, collect 1/5 of the produce during the good years, and store the grain under guard. When the famine comes, there will be food." Pharaoh rose from his throne. He looked at his officials, then back to Joseph. "Can we find anyone like this man, in whom is the Spirit of God?" He turned to Joseph. "Since God has made all this known to you, you shall be in charge of my palace. Only in regard to the throne will I be greater than you." Joseph blinked. Was this really happening? Pharaoh removed his signet ring and placed it on Joseph's finger. From the dungeon to the palace, from forgotten to favored, Joseph was now ruler over all Egypt. Not even his brothers knew that heaven had begun the next chapter. 7 years passed like a dream. Under Joseph's wise leadership, Egypt flourished. The harvests were bountiful, fields of gold and grain stretched beyond the horizon. Joseph organized teams of workers in every city, gathering and storing the surplus into vast storehouses, tall as towers, strong as fortresses. He moved through the cities daily, calm, watchful, guided by wisdom beyond his years. He married Asenath, daughter of a priest, and together they had 2 sons. The first he named Manasseh, God has made me forget all my hardship. The second, Ephraim, God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering. Joseph had not forgotten his homeland, nor his family, but God was healing the ache. Then came the 8th year. The rains faltered, the soil cracked, the fields turned to dust, the Nile thinned, and the wind carried hunger across the land. The famine had begun, but in Egypt there was food because Joseph had prepared. People came in droves from cities, towns, villages. The palace gates were lined with weary travelers every day, crying for bread. Joseph opened the storehouses. He rationed the grain with order and fairness. Egypt survived, but famine does not know borders. It reached into Canaan, into the tents of Jacob. There, far from Pharaoh's palace, Joseph's aging father sat silently one morning. His sons Joseph's brothers paced restlessly. Their flocks were thinning. Their children cried through the nights. Jacob looked up and said, "Why are you standing here staring at one another? I have heard there is grain in Egypt. Go down and buy for us, that we may live and not die." And so, 10 sons of Jacob, Joseph's own brothers, gathered sacks, silver, and supplies. Only Benjamin, the youngest, stayed behind, and the brothers set out toward the very land where the boy they once betrayed had become ruler. They did not know that the next door they would knock on was Joseph's, and heaven was watching. The journey from Canaan to Egypt was long and hot. Dust rose behind the 10 brothers' caravan as they crossed deserts and plains, driven not by ambition but by hunger. They finally reached the mighty gates of Egypt, tall and magnificent, with soldiers in golden armor standing watch. Camels groaned. The brothers looked around in awe. Everything was bigger than they had imagined, walls carved with strange symbols, markets buzzing with every language under the sun. But they had no time to marvel. They came for grain. And they were directed to one man, the governor of all Egypt. They didn't know. It was Joseph. He stood atop the palace steps, robes flowing, speaking in the Egyptian tongue. He watched them approach 10 men, dusty and weathered. His heart thundered. He recognized them instantly. But they did not recognize him. Years had changed him. No longer the boy in a colorful robe, but a prince in royal gold and fine linen. His face was stronger, his eyes wiser. Joseph stood still, and then his brothers bowed. They bowed low before him, just like the dream he once had. A tremble passed through Joseph's soul. He cleared his throat and spoke coldly through an interpreter. "Where do you come from?" "From the land of Canaan," they replied. "To buy food." Joseph's eyes narrowed. He remembered the pit, the chains, the silence of betrayal. He said sharply, "You are spies. You've come to see where our land is unprotected." The brothers were stunned. "No, my lord. Your servants are honest men. We are all sons of one man. We were 12, but one is no more, and the youngest is with our father today." Joseph's heart squeezed. They remembered him. They believed him dead. But he said nothing of who he was. Instead, he tested them. "If you are honest, bring your youngest brother to me. Until then, one of you will stay in prison." He ordered Simeon to be bound before their eyes. The brothers were shaken. They whispered among themselves in Hebrew, unaware Joseph understood. "We are being punished for what we did to our brother." Joseph turned away, tears in his eyes, but he hid his face. He returned, regained his composure, and instructed his servants to fill their sacks with grain, and secretly return their silver. And with Simeon in custody, the others began the journey back home. Hearts heavy, minds troubled. A mystery had begun, and God was stirring the next piece. The caravan pressed on under the Canaan sun. The 9 brothers returned home with heavy hearts and full sacks. But one less brother, Simeon, was in prison, and in their minds, something else haunted them: the strange ruler of Egypt, his words, his gaze, his tests. It was as if he knew them. As they neared home, their father's tent came into view. Jacob stood waiting, old eyes watching the horizon. He had counted the days. When he saw only 9 sons return, his heart sank. They dismounted and approached quietly. No one spoke at first. The air felt thick with dread. Then Reuben stepped forward. He told their father everything: the harsh ruler, the accusation of spying, the demand to bring Benjamin, and how Simeon had been kept as a guarantee. Jacob was broken. "Why did you tell him you had another brother?" he asked, grief weighing down his voice. They replied, He questioned us thoroughly, Father. We didn't know he would demand this. Jacob shook his head slowly. You would take Benjamin from me now too, he whispered. Joseph is gone, Simeon is no more, and now you would take Benjamin. He turned away, clutching his chest. I will not let him go. My son shall not go down with you. If mischief befalls him, you will bring down my gray hairs in sorrow to the grave. The brothers stood in silence. No one dared to argue, no one could comfort him. Days passed, then weeks, and the food began to run low again. The grain they brought back was almost gone. Hunger loomed again over Jacob's household, and the need to return to Egypt grew impossible to ignore. Judah, once the silent one, stepped forward. He looked his father in the eyes. Send the boy with me. I will be responsible for him. If I do not bring him back, let me bear the blame forever. Jacob sat silently for a while, trembling. Then, he nodded, but not without care. He instructed them to take double silver and the finest gifts they could carry: balm, honey, spices, myrrh, pistachio nuts, almonds. And so, at last, Benjamin the youngest, the beloved, the last of Rachel's sons, prepared to journey to Egypt. Jacob watched him ride away, eyes full of prayers, heart clinging to hope. The journey resumed once again, but what none of them knew was that this time, Egypt held not only grain but a turning point in destiny. The journey back to Egypt felt different. This time, Benjamin rode with them, the youngest, the cherished, the only remaining son of Rachel. His eyes held wonder and a quiet nervousness. The others surrounded him protectively. Their father had entrusted his very soul to their hands. As they entered Egypt, the towering gates of the city loomed once more. The sounds of the market filled the air, vendors shouting, camels groaning, chariots rolling on sun-baked stone. But none of that mattered now. All 10 brothers were thinking of one thing: Simeon and the Egyptian ruler. They arrived at the palace gates. Suddenly, an official approached them. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse. He simply said, "Come, the governor wishes to dine with you at noon." The brothers looked at each other, stunned. A meal with the governor. Confusion gave way to fear. They followed in silence. Soon, they were led to Joseph's personal house. The grandeur of the space was overwhelming: columns carved with detail, wide courtyards blooming with flowers, and fountains singing softly into the air. But their hearts beat fast. They were certain this was a trap. "This is because of the money," one whispered. "The silver that was in our sacks will be seized, made slaves." But then, Joseph's steward came to meet them. To their surprise, the man smiled. He listened to their concern and waved it off gently. "Peace be with you. Do not be afraid. Your God and the God of your father has given you treasure in your sacks. I received your money." And with that, he brought out Simeon. The sight of him alive, free, filled their hearts with relief. Simeon embraced each brother, eyes moist. It was a reunion long delayed. Then they were taken into Joseph's house to wash their feet and prepare for the meal. They set their gifts in order: spices, honey, almonds, and waited nervously. At last, Joseph entered. The brothers rose quickly and bowed low. He looked at them, and his eyes fell on Benjamin. Time slowed. It was the first time in years he saw his youngest brother. His full brother. A wave of emotion washed over him. But he remained composed. "Is this your youngest brother, of whom you spoke?" he asked. They nodded. Joseph stepped closer. "God be gracious to you, my son," he said softly. Then he turned away suddenly. Tears filled his eyes. He hurried into his private chamber and wept, years of longing, wrapped in one moment. After composing himself, he returned. The feast was laid. Strangely, the Egyptians sat by themselves, the brothers at another table, and Joseph at his own. And then came the surprise. They were seated in the exact order of their birth. Each brother looked at the other in disbelief. How could this Egyptian ruler know? And to Benjamin, Joseph gave 5 times as much food. No one could explain it. But for the first time in a long while, laughter returned. The brothers ate, drank, and rejoiced in the house of the very one they had once betrayed. But Joseph had not finished his test. He had looked into their eyes, heard their voices, and seen something new. Yet one final test would reveal everything. Tomorrow, the real trial would begin. Morning light spilled into the Egyptian palace. The feast was over. Laughter had echoed through the halls the night before, something Joseph hadn't heard in years. Not from them. He had watched them closely. Watched how they treated Benjamin. The way they served him, protected him, smiled when he spoke. But the question remained, had they truly changed? Joseph ordered his steward, fill the men's sacks with as much food as they can carry, and return each man's silver in his sack. But in the sack of the youngest, place my silver cup. The steward nodded and moved swiftly. By dawn, the brothers were on their way. The sun rose high as they traveled, joyful, light-hearted, unaware. Simeon was with them again. Benjamin was safe. All seemed well. But then hoofbeats behind them. Dust clouded the horizon. Egyptian soldiers. The steward arrived, flanked by guards. He spoke with force. Why have you repaid good with evil? Why have you stolen my master's silver cup? The brothers froze. What? No. We would never do such a thing. If any of us has it, let him die, one cried. And the rest of us will become your slaves, the steward said. Very well. But only the one with the cup will become a slave. The rest may go free. They hurriedly opened their sacks, one by one. Reuben, Levi, Judah, Simeon, Zebulun. Each sack was empty save for food and silver. Then the steward reached Benjamin's. The cup shone inside like betrayal. A gasp swept through the group. No one spoke. Benjamin stared at it, wide-eyed and horrified. The brothers tore their clothes. In that moment, their hearts shattered. They had made a promise to their father, and now, it was happening again. They returned to the city silent, broken. When they stood before Joseph once more, they fell to the ground. Joseph stared at them, his voice cold. What is this you've done? Did you not know a man like me can divine such things? Judah stepped forward, a man transformed. He didn't shift blame. He didn't accuse Benjamin. He said, What can we say, my lord? God has uncovered our guilt. We are all your slaves. But Joseph pressed. No, only the one with the cup will remain. The rest of you may go home in peace. And then, Judah pleaded. He told Joseph of the old man his father who had already lost one son. He told him of the promise he made to protect Benjamin with his life. He said, If the boy is not with us, our father will die. Please, take me instead. Let me be your slave. The room went silent. Joseph's breath caught. He turned his face away. And wept, louder than before. This was no longer a test. This was truth. They had changed. They were no longer the brothers who had thrown him into a pit. They were protectors now, and Joseph could hold it in no longer. The room was heavy with silence. 10 brothers knelt before Egypt's ruler, guilt suffocating every breath. Judah's words still echoed, Let me stay in his place. Joseph looked at them, really looked. Tears shimmered in his eyes, his lips trembled. His heart, full and aching, could take no more. He raised his hand. Everyone, leave me. The Egyptian attendants paused confused, then quickly exited, leaving Joseph alone with his brothers. They remained kneeling, heads bowed, still unaware. Then, a cry, a wail, a sob bursting from deep within Joseph's soul. He wept so loudly, the sound filled the palace. Even the servants outside heard, and in between sobs came the words, I am Joseph. The brothers froze, time stood still. He stepped closer. Is my father still alive? Silence. Eyes slowly lifted, faces drained of color. He said it again, I am Joseph, your brother, the one you sold into slavery. They trembled. How could it be? How could this be the same boy? Now a prince, an Egyptian ruler. Their hearts pounded, fear surged. Would he now punish them? Joseph saw it in their eyes, and with a voice full of grace, he spoke, Don't be afraid. Don't be angry with yourselves for selling me. It was God who sent me ahead of you to preserve life. He stepped closer still. For 2 years now, there's been famine. And there will be 5 more. God sent me ahead to save lives and keep our family alive. They looked at him, stunned. He smiled through tears. It was not you who sent me here, but God. Joseph stretched out his arms, no longer a ruler on a throne, but a brother restored. He embraced them, one by one. Tears flowed freely. Laughter broke through sobs. They held him like a dream returned. And he held them like a burden lifted. Then Joseph spoke with urgency. Hurry back to my father. Tell him, Joseph is alive. Tell him all you've seen. Bring him here quickly. You will live near me, and I will provide for you, for the famine still has years to go." He turned to Benjamin. Their eyes met, brothers of the same mother. They wept again. Joseph wrapped Benjamin in a deep embrace, unable to let go. After years of silence, of slavery, of separation, Joseph was Joseph again. Not just in name, but in family. The news thundered across Egypt's golden corridors: Joseph's brothers had come. And not just that, they were family. Servants rushed about. Wagons were prepared. Food was packed. Robes, gifts, silver, all loaded generously. Pharaoh himself had heard of it, and he was pleased. He said to Joseph, "Tell your brothers, load your animals. Go back to Canaan. Bring your father and your households. I will give you the best of Egypt." Joseph was already ahead. He embraced each brother again, pressing wagons and supplies into their hands. "Take these for my father," he said, laying rich garments, silver, and donkeys bearing grain before them. "Tell him everything you've seen. Tell him how God has lifted me. And do not quarrel on the way." The brothers nodded, still amazed. They had come searching for grain. Now they're left with riches, peace, and Joseph. But the journey wasn't over. Far in Canaan, Jacob sat quietly under an olive tree. His eyes, aged and dim, scanned the horizon as they always did, waiting, hoping. And then, the sound of hooves, voices, laughter. The brothers returned. Jacob rose slowly, heart pounding. They leapt from their animals. "Father," they cried, "Joseph is alive. He is ruler over all Egypt." Jacob froze. The words struck like lightning. He staggered. At first, he could not believe it. But as the wagons rolled in, filled with treasures and food, he saw. The truth glowed before him. Tears filled his eyes. "It is enough," Jacob whispered. "Joseph, my son, is alive. I will go and see him before I die." And so began the journey. An old man, finally rising from mourning. His caravan wound through deserts and hills, through lands he'd never dreamed to cross again. At Beersheba, Jacob stopped. He made an altar. And there, in the night, God spoke, "Jacob, I am God. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt. I will go with you. I will make you a great nation. And Joseph's hand shall close your eyes." Tears flowed again, but now tears of peace. Jacob rose. He knew now this journey was guided, not by fate, but by divine hands, and Egypt awaited a reunion long prayed for. The land of Goshen shimmered in the morning sun. Palm trees swayed gently, and the golden sand stretched out peacefully. Joseph stood by his chariot, heart pounding. His royal garments flowed, but beneath them beat the heart of a son, longing. Then, the dust rose in the distance, a caravan. It was them. His father was coming. Joseph rushed forward. Chariot wheels roared across the sand. He couldn't wait. Not for ceremony. Not for guards. Not for protocol. His eyes searched every figure. And then he saw him. An old man, bent by years, face lined with sorrow and wisdom. Eyes filled with wonder. "Father." Joseph leapt from his chariot. He ran, no dignity, no hesitation. Jacob saw him, and the years melted away, before he could even speak. Joseph fell on his neck and wept. He held him, and wept. Jacob embraced him, trembling. My son Joseph, I thought you were dead." Joseph could only weep harder. They stood there, father and son, locked in a moment heaven itself had watched for years. Tears watered the sand beneath them. It was not just a reunion, it was healing. Jacob finally looked into his son's eyes that once dreamed dreams too great for a child. Now, those dreams had come true. "I am ready to die," Jacob said softly, "now that I have seen your face again." But Joseph shook his head. "No, father, you will live. You will see more. This land is yours now. Rest." He led Jacob gently toward their new home. The land of Goshen would become their haven. There, Joseph settled his father, his brothers, and their families. He gave them the best of the land: green pastures, still waters, peace. And for the first time in decades, Jacob slept without mourning. And Joseph, he visited often, no longer the lonely dreamer. No longer the forgotten prisoner. Now a son restored, a brother redeemed, a man who had waited long for this day. The sun rose gently over Egypt as Joseph prepared for a meeting unlike any other. Today, his father Jacob, the son of Isaac, the son of Abraham, would stand before Pharaoh, the ruler of the mightiest empire on earth. Joseph dressed Jacob with honor, wrapping fine linen over his father's shoulders, gently fixing his scarf. "Are you ready, father?" Jacob smiled softly. "I have walked with God many years. I'm always ready." They entered the palace. Golden pillars, marble floors, royal guards, flutes playing softly. Jacob leaned on his staff, eyes sharp despite the age in his bones. Then Pharaoh entered, regal and commanding, but Jacob, he was not intimidated. He looked the king in the eye and he blessed him. Pharaoh was astonished. "Your father is not like other men," he later whispered to Joseph. "There is something holy about him." Pharaoh asked Jacob, "How old are you?" And Jacob replied with honesty, "The years of my life are 130. Few and difficult have been the days of my life. But God has kept me." And once again he blessed Pharaoh. Pharaoh smiled, deeply honored. In the days that followed, Joseph did more than provide for his family. He led wisely through famine. He managed Egypt with such skill that even foreigners came for help. The people praised him. But in the quiet corners of Goshen, something more beautiful was unfolding. Jacob called for Joseph. "I am old, my son. Bring your boys to me." Joseph came, holding Manasseh and Ephraim, his sons born in Egypt. Jacob's eyes were dim. He could hardly see, but when he touched the boys, his heart rejoiced. "These are your sons?" Joseph nodded. "Bring them closer." He kissed them, held them, and placed his right hand on the younger Ephraim and his left on the older Manasseh. Joseph quickly moved to correct him. "Father, Manasseh is the firstborn." But Jacob refused. "I know, my son, I know. But Ephraim shall be greater. His descendants shall become a multitude of nations." And then, with trembling hands and eyes lifted to heaven, Jacob blessed them. "May the God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life to this day, the angel who has delivered me from all harm, bless these boys." Joseph was moved to tears. He saw not only his sons being blessed, but a divine legacy being passed down, from Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob, to him, and now to his children. The promises of God were alive, and Goshen, though foreign land, was now holy ground. The days grew quiet in Goshen. The famine was long over. Egypt thrived. Israel, Jacob's family, was settled in peace. But time, it does not stop. And the time came when Jacob, the son of Isaac, grew weak and old, very old. He called for Joseph again. "My son, gather your brothers. My time is near. I must speak what the Lord has placed upon my heart." And so Joseph went out. From the far corners of Goshen, they came: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Dan, Gad, Asher, Naphtali, Benjamin. All stood in a circle around their father's bed. 12 grown men, sons of one man. Each carried stories of failure, of forgiveness, of destiny. Jacob rose slowly. His eyes glimmered, and one by one, he looked them in the eye and spoke over each of them. To Reuben, his firstborn, he spoke of strength but also instability. "To you, my son, were the rights of the firstborn, but you defiled your father's bed. You will not excel." To Simeon and Levi, he spoke firmly. "You are warriors, but your swords have brought blood and cruelty. You will be scattered." Then came Judah, and Jacob's tone changed. "Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until Shiloh comes." Joseph's eyes widened. He knew a prophecy was unfolding. From Judah would come kings, and more. To the others, Jacob gave blessings shaped by their character, their future, their tribes. To Joseph, he spoke last. "Joseph, you are a fruitful vine, a vine near a spring whose branches climb over a wall." He recalled the years Joseph had suffered. "The archers attacked you with bitterness, but your bow remained steady. Your arms were made strong by the hands of the mighty one of Jacob, the shepherd, the rock of Israel." And then, he raised his voice, trembling. "May the God of your father help you. May the Almighty bless you with blessings of the heavens above, blessings of the deep that lies below, and blessings of the breast and womb." Joseph bowed, his heart overflowing. He had been rejected, sold, accused, imprisoned. But now, he was blessed beyond measure. Jacob laid back on his bed, peaceful. His work was done. But he gave one last command: "Do not bury me in Egypt, but take me back. Lay me with my fathers." In the cave of Machpelah, where Abraham and Sarah lie, where Isaac and Rebekah lie, where I buried Leah. A silence filled the room. Then Joseph bowed deeply at his father's side. "We will do as you say." And so the sons of Israel stood in the shadow of their father's final words. 12 men, 12 tribes, a nation being born. Not by land or army, but by blessing. The sun was just beginning to rise when Jacob breathed his last. The tent was quiet, no cries, just reverent silence. Joseph kissed his father's forehead and stepped outside. It was time to honor his final request. He ordered the physicians of Egypt to embalm Jacob, and for 40 days, they did as was the custom. But Egypt didn't just mourn with medicine. For 70 days, the nation grieved. From Pharaoh's court to the streets of Thebes, people wept. The Egyptians had come to love this old Hebrew patriarch, the father of the man who saved their land. And when the mourning was complete, Joseph went to Pharaoh. "My father made me swear to bury him where his fathers lie in the land of Canaan." Pharaoh agreed without hesitation, and so began a journey unlike any Egypt had seen. Joseph rode in a grand chariot, surrounded by Pharaoh's officials, elders, and charioteers. Behind them came the servants of Jacob's house, and finally, his brothers, each riding silently, heads low. They crossed the desert, past the Nile, beyond the Jordan, to a place called Adad. They stopped and mourned again with great and solemn lamentation 7 more days. The Canaanites saw it and whispered, "This is a deep mourning by the Egyptians," and so the place was called Abel Mizraim. There, in the cave of Machpelah beside Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, and Leah, Jacob was buried. And the sons of Israel stood by the tomb in silence. Another generation had passed, but Joseph's brothers grew uneasy. What if Joseph now turns on us? What if he's only been kind because our father was alive? Fear gripped them, so they sent a message. Before he died, our father said, "Please forgive your brothers." Then they came and fell down before Joseph. "We are your servants," they said. Joseph looked at them and wept. "Don't be afraid," he said. "Am I in the place of God? You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good to save many lives." He reassured them with warmth. "I will provide for you and your children," and Joseph kept his word. Years passed, children became men, fields were planted. Israel became a nation in Egypt, and Joseph, he lived to see the 3rd generation of Ephraim's children, and even the children of Machir, son of Manasseh. But the time came when Joseph too grew old. He called for his brothers and their children. "I am about to die, but God will surely come to your aid and take you up from this land to the land he promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." And with that, he made them swear, "When God comes to your aid, carry my bones up from here." Joseph died at the age of 110. He was embalmed and placed in a coffin in Egypt. And though he rested in a foreign land, his eyes had looked toward the promise. The curtain closed, not with sorrow, but with hope, for the God of Abraham had spoken. And Israel would not remain in Egypt forever.